All right, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the I Want an Effing Job podcast. Today I am with Jim Kunkle. Jim and I have known each other for some time. We were colleagues at SSPC and then AMP. Jim is here to talk about his job search and, frankly, a lot of the success that he's had. Jim's a super positive guy. Jim is probably the best networker I know. So I think during this episode today that Jim's going to relay a lot of his experience and some things there that work for him that might not quite be working for a lot of Gen X people. Jim might not agree. I will tell you, and if I didn't tell you on the last episode, I'm a bit of an introvert, so networking is not always great for me. It's a struggle. So I always look forward to things that Jim has to say because he's a natural at it. So, um, Jim, welcome. Welcome to my second episode, and I'm excited to have you on. Why don't you tell our vast sea of listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Mike, before I do that, I'd like to say congratulations. I saw the debut episode, an amazing episode. I was kind of scratching my head when you first talked about the title and what the focus was going to be. I wasn't quite sure where you were going to take this, but after that first episode, a very positive, and I think it's also a very informative podcast. And I encourage everyone to not only listen to it, watch it on Spotify, but also share it out with everybody. Make sure you're following it and you share it out as well. But my background professionally, let me just cover the aspect of really my last 15 plus years, which has been on the industrial coding side. Originally, I'm based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I've had the opportunity back roughly about 15 years or so ago to get involved into fabrication and also powder coating. From that experience was really my first time in a way of getting involved into uh, doing coatings and also coil coatings as well. When you think of some of the products that go in your home or type of equipment that you buy, it's going to be serviced by coils of steel. In a lot of cases, those are coated coils going into production. So it's kind of where I started at. And then I had the greatest opportunity that kind of through a friend kind of opened up for me, which was the opportunity to join the Society for Protective Coatings, the SSPC, working as a business development manager. And then through the transition into the merger of NACE International and SSPC into AMP. And I had the opportunity to work under that association. My most recent position was working nearly 3 years with International Paint, Akzo Nobel. And there I managed a team on the specification selling side. And currently I'm in the process of transitioning into a new opportunity, working for another leader in the coatings industry. So my let's say last 15 years or so have been heavily involved in industrial coatings and working in different aspects of the industry, management, marketing, sales, and things like that. But like you had mentioned, for me, networking and part of the networking opportunity for me was to become a content creator. So I do produce a series called Coatings Talk, which involves live streams, video production, a newsletter, articles, and also there's also involved with that different types of technical papers that I do write for that. And then last year, at the beginning of 2024, I during the pandemic, I got really active into digital transformation, especially in the coatings and corrosion industry. But instead of just focusing on digital transformation in those two industries, I just said holistically, I need to look at digital transformation. And I launched a podcast in January of 2024, a year ago, this past week, called The Digital Revolution with Jim Kunkle. The podcast has just started its second season, and I'm on all the major different podcasting platforms. I'm averaging a little over 1,000 downloads per episode. And I do a Monday release of content. I do bonus episodes as well. It's just audio. And then from Digital Revolution, I also do live streams, video content, and articles and things like that. So I've gone from being a representative in the coatings and corrosion industry to also being a content creator. Some people label me as an influencer on the industry side, but I really don't view myself that way because what I like to do is view myself as an evangelist for the coatings industry. And I want to really inform people out there, educate them and enlighten them on what the two different industries are, but also to hopefully it inspires a younger generation to take over for people like myself who are aging year after year.
I will say I think the evangelist moniker fits you.
Thank you.
And I always, when I talk to people about you, I say Kunkel was doing content before content was cool. So I know for a long time you've been involved in that, and it is good content. But when we get to the end of this, I want you to make sure you give a plug of where people can find your information, how to access your podcast and your website and everything. So, um, but it is I'm very pleased to have you here to talk about the Gen X job search. And as I said, and you reiterated, I mean, you have recently gone through a job search, and your comment to me, frankly, when we did our little pregame thing the past few days, I was a little shocked, honestly, when your response to one of my emails was, Mike, I haven't had a negative experience. Um, and which, I mean, it shocked me. The things that you read. In fact, I just read an article today in the Wall Street Journal about companies putting up fake job listings, and how it's not just the Gen X folks and the people over 50 who are frustrated. It's all white collar professionals, because they're applying for jobs that don't exist. And we as Gen X have different problems with, we've talked about ageism, and we've talked about being overqualified for some positions and underqualified for others, and blah blah blah. There's a lot there. Um, and even you admitted to me just about 30 minutes ago that after a previous job loss, it was a negative experience. But I want
Yeah.
to focus on the positive. I think that ultimately, as we go through on this podcast, there's going to be a lot of people that we come on and talk to, and frankly, the people who are listening who are having negative experiences, there's got to be a silver lining. There's got to be some positive that comes out of it eventually. And you having those experiences is important. So I do want to talk. I want you to talk about um, some of those positive experiences. I mean, I would say one giant positive is you were let go. What was it, November of
Yes.
24? So it's been a couple of months, and you were on the cusp of something new, as you stated earlier, that you'll be announcing soon. So, you know, why don't you talk a little bit about that? Tell us what you've done. I want you to talk about your prolific networking, and how it is that you are able to um, engage with so many people and care about so many people and keep them in your corner, that it works for you.
Perfect. So a lot of times when I do talk to colleagues and contacts and those that I'm network with, and I start to talk with them about their networks, and a lot of times I'll hear it's too late for me to start a network, or I'm too far along, or maybe they've had a little bit of a setback with their job, or they're wanting to look for a job. In fact, a survey that had been done in 2024 by JobVite by Employ, nearly 50% of workers over 50 are open for new job opportunities. And I think what that does highlight that there's still that proactive mindset and also a willingness to really embrace reinvention and new challenges for those that are 50 and older. And I use the word reinvention, and here's how I'll tie everything in for you. When someone says, I'm too old, I can't build a network, this is a reinvention opportunity for you because you can do it. Maybe it takes you only a year to really establish some traction within your industry. And what happened for me this time versus the last time I had a corporate downsizing was that I had a strong network built together of professionals, other type of different industry related connections and things like that. And with a multiplier, when you have a network, you're not only network with that individual, you're network within their network, and it expands and expands and expands. So it doesn't matter if you have 100 networking connections or 1,000 or 10,000. There's always a multiplier to it. Now, by establishing yourself with a network, or you start to do things within your industry, it could be content creating, it could be posting on LinkedIn, it could be whatever ways you want to do that. You start to gain a kind of an image. And when you have that image and people say, oh yeah, Jim or Mike post this information, or they share this content, or they do this, and I really get a lot of value out of that. Well, that helps really to build your professional brand. So that's reinvention as well. You take yourself from where you feel you're deficient to being into a surplus. This time around for me, what ended up happening was November 15th was my last day working with International Akzo Nobel, and I had done a video. That video had over 7,000 views on just LinkedIn. And what it was I was announcing that I was a free agent. I used the word free agent. I did thank my employer at International Paint Akzo Nobel, but I said, listen, I'm now open up for new opportunities and everything's looking great. I had a very strong positive message, like you said as well. And next thing I know, I started having recruiters reaching out to me. I will concede that for positions that I applied for, either through different job search engines or LinkedIn, a lot of them didn't really kind of go anywhere for me.
Yeah.
But with the headhunters reaching out to me, they were reaching out to me because some of them had people forward my video to them or my contact information or talked about me, or the headhunters or the recruiters saw it. And so I had a conversation that literally started with 3 or 4 different entities. No, one didn't work
Hmm.
out. One definitely has worked out. The other two are still kind of in a process state. But everything for me has been different this time versus the last time that I was in a corporate downsizing. And a lot of it has to do with the network, how you handle utilizing content, social media, but also to keeping that positive message going out there and networking through your friends and your colleagues, and also taking advantage of a lot of things that you can do. That could be adding comments to different posts, or maybe adding a different type of additional information on articles. Even like I say, creating your own content. I just started creating content before the pandemic. And within the first year, I had a lot of people say, hey, I really enjoy what you're doing out there. So, like I say, it doesn't take you years to do this stuff. It could take you a year or less. But if you really put some grit, diligence to it, and hard work, it will pay out for you. It really will.
Well, how big, there's a two-parter here. How big is your network on LinkedIn? First of all, and second of all, because I know, Jim, I know you've got a pretty extensive network on LinkedIn. And second of all, what do if as somebody, I think a better way of saying it is, when somebody gets that notice that they're being laid off or let go from their job, how do you recommend them reaching out to their network? And is it more like hands-on personal, like you're picking up the phone? Are you sending emails? Are you texting? Or it can't just be, well, I'm going to post on LinkedIn and hope that people see it.
Yeah, you're right about that. So when it comes to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn, when you really look at me, the predominant, even though I do have YouTube channels, the predominant channel for me, or let's say social media platform for me, I'll call LinkedIn as a social media platform, is LinkedIn. That's where I really have my everything focused for me. It's the end all be all for me. And it's been that way since day one when it first opened. But what I have when it comes to connections, when I receive a connection request, I do look in it, what's in it for me, what's in it for that contact. Because there are a lot of people that will send you a contact connection. They want to be connected to you. But what they're looking to do is, in some cases, they might be looking to uh, work within your contacts themselves. In other words, your network. They're trying to
Right.
kind of tie into that. So I really want to look in, because the reason why is when I have a network connection, I don't want them to feel like they're being spammed through me. So I very much go through and I don't accept all of them. I really look at, are they in my particular hemisphere when it comes to my field, my professional field? Are they kind of, what do they post out there? What do they do out there? And I'm real picky about that. So right now I have nearly 6,000 connections. Now followers, I think I'm trending closer to 8,000 followers right
Okay.
now. Anybody can follow you on LinkedIn. You can follow anybody on LinkedIn. But when it comes to a connection, I'm a little bit more diligent on there to make sure I qualify them and just make sure it makes sense for not only myself, but also for them to be connected to me. but I also keep the mindset of I don't want to have my network spammed in the same process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
There's 6,000 of your closest friends then.
correct. Now,
Yeah.
related to, you're right. You just don't take and post something on a social media channel and say, okay, I put a video out there that I'm a free agent. What I did with that particular video was that I did send it out to several contacts within the network based on my industry and what I was looking to really kind of capitalize as a next position. So I went after certain influencers. I went after certain job titles within that. The other thing too, I still hashtag like you wouldn't believe on
Mm.
LinkedIn. I think it still works. And then the other thing that I tend to do is I will also add different comments to it to kind of, and then I always respond to anybody that posts a comment. I respond back because what happens is the algorithm sees that as it starts to see there's 30, 40, 50 comments. Next thing you know, you're basically getting into the recommend part of the LinkedIn. And so a lot of times that is a multiplier as well, where people are receiving that because the algorithm is pushing that into their check this out, type of activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
But
that's
but emails too. Yeah, I would definitely, if I don't pay the $800 for the premium subscription with LinkedIn, but you do get so many messages you can send per month. So I take advantage of that. But a lot of times I'll have them not only as a contact, as a key contact, I'll have them in my LinkedIn network, but in most cases, I'm also going to have them in my phone. And
okay.
so
Yeah.
that's how I will communicate. I have a way to send them messaging that way that, hey, I'm looking for a job. You have anything open?
I think one of the something that people should not sleep on is the power of video on social media.
Yeah.
And I know it's uncomfortable. Frankly, this is something that I've only recently come to embrace because as I record these podcasts and we put them out there on Spotify, soon to come to other networks as well, there's a video component. And a lot of times it's awkward to have your face on video and put it out there for the world to see. But otherwise, what people are seeing when you go on LinkedIn and you say, you've lost your job and you're looking for work and you write a long post and the post may catch on, but I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do with this podcast, honestly, is I want to put a human face to this problem of Gen X employment because it's easy to go, as you all know, right? Anybody listening to this is on social media, and whether it's a Facebook or a Twitter or LinkedIn or pick a platform, um, it's easy to go and write stuff and click send and then disappear back into the ether, right?
Yeah.
Like Homer Simpson disappearing into the bush, right? But uh, it's also easier to ignore. When you put video out, I think you're being more honest and open, frankly, a little bit more vulnerable. I mean, not everyone's as good looking as we are, right, Jim? So it's, you're putting yourself out there, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that's one of those things that maybe if you're a 20, 25-year professional, and you've kind of gotten into this routine, you got to start looking at things a little bit differently. It's
I
not the same
yeah.
job process anymore.
I agree completely. I have the face for an audio podcast, and doing that. To your point, there are a lot of takes I do. I'm not a one. I do know somebody that I routinely stream with, and she's a one, literally a hit record and no editing. Absolutely, there are people that are that great. But it also brings up a point too for those that are over 50 looking for a position. I remember as a younger professional, it was embarrassing to be downsized and announcing it to people. You were looking for a job and you really weren't telling a lot of people, oh, by the way, I'm on unemployment or I'm out of a
Right.
job right now. I hate to say it, maybe kind of embarrassing. And now you're flash forward into 2024, 2025. Now it's okay. I'm going to put this video out there saying, I'm a free agent. I'm looking for a position. You might have some hesitance to do that because you're like, when I was younger, I would never do something like this if it existed back then. But it's important to do it. And the reason why is because take advantage of the algorithm, take advantage of your network. I don't mean in a
Yeah.
negative way. I'm talking about in a positive way, because if you have a strong network, they are very much invested in making sure that you're, as much as they want to be successful, they want you to be successful as well. And what I found working in the coatings and corrosion industry, a lot of times people tend to be more of a family type of familiarity between each other. Even with competitors, I'm friends with competitors and things like that. So I find this industry to be a little bit more of a social industry, if that makes some
Hmm.
sense. But
Interesting.
but the technological gaps with those that are 50 and older can be huge. TikTok, I know a very successful person who in the roofing industry is extremely successful on TikTok until it gets totally banned out of the
Right.
United
Yeah.
States. But I feel bad, but also too, he has other platforms he can rely on, not just TikTok. But making sure that you kind of look at, I don't have a position right now. What do I need to do to find a job? And the best way to do that is to reach out to your network. Well, how do you do that? It can be through social media posts, it can be direct emails to them, phone calls. I did talk to a lot of people. I'm a grip and grinner type of person. I'd rather talk to somebody than send them an email and wait for a response, because I think that interaction, that personalization is important to everybody. And I think they become more invested into your plight and your search if you talk to them versus just to send them an email or text message. But
Yeah, I agree with that. That's important just from the standpoint of um, we all have email addresses. A lot of us have multiple email addresses, and email is so easy as your inbox fills up. It's easy to lose track of an email. So if I get an email from someone saying, "Hey man, can you help me out? I'm looking for work," and I don't respond right away, that gets pushed down, 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 down until I probably am going to forget about it. I hate to say it. So, but picking up the phone, um, and even if you end up just leaving a voicemail or do a follow up after
yeah,
that, so much more uh, memorable, right? And easier or it's more difficult to ignore.
yeah, I think the immediacy is a lot different. To
Yeah,
your point, people they're a little bit more responsive to voice messages than they would be maybe a text message or an email.
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, like when I lost my job a couple years ago and I did put out a message on LinkedIn and I had my phone ring, if, a handful of calls from my network of people saying, "Hey, sorry to hear it. I'll keep my eyes out for you," and they reached out to me, and I mean, there was a handful of people I called, but when you see that name come across your phone, um, and it's like, oh, so and so didn't forget about me. That's sort of gratifying. It's a little dopamine hit as well.
Yeah. And you also have to look at it when you are searching for a new job opportunity. You've been downsized. Uh, Looking for that job is a full-time job too. So you have to
Yeah.
make sure that you do time yourself properly, that you are kind of following up. Another thing too is when you go into an interview situation, and I'll give you a good example. One of the interviews opportunities that I had, it didn't work out in the end, and I was clearly overqualified. But the company started looking at, maybe this is an opportunity for us to open up another position, but ultimately they weren't ready to do that for another maybe 6 months or so. What I did a lot of times when I knew what the job description was, I knew what the roles and responsibility was, especially with me being more involved in business development, sales, marketing, things like that. I would provide, I talked to you earlier about, most of the ones I work with, I provided them a business development plan, because the jobs I was really
Yeah.
kind of applying for or kind of interviewing for,
Was that
working towards.
unsolicited or did they ask you for that?
No, they didn't ask it for me.
Okay.
And what I found is that it opened up the opportunity where in two cases where they were looking at me for the position that I was interviewing for, they said, "Hey, what you wrote here and went over." In fact, one of the interviews I did had a panel presentation where I had to do a PowerPoint presentation and go through my business development plan and provide more specifics. It took me from being one of 8 candidates to being one of 3 candidates. And the reason why is they could see that not only could I uh, develop a plan, but also they felt confident that I could work that plan and also continuously improve it. I could interact with other entities within the sales and marketing team, the management team, and they started looking at it a little different than me just responding. So, what are your future career goals? Where do you see
Right.
yourself in the next 10 years? And what I like to do is I like to try to, and this might come across a little bit, I don't want to say conceited, but what I like to try to do, if possible, in an interview is control the situation. Is I would rather provide them information so that they understand exactly who I am versus waiting for them to try to draw it out of me. I want to be able to provide them a full scope and understanding of who this candidate is. And if I can have the ability to change the conversation, and it does happen, now that gives me an upper footing with them where I'm kind of in a way telling them how I will operate and they get a better understanding of how I can fit versus them just me waiting for them to draw out the information from me during interview questions.
Yeah.
Ask the question, respond. Ask the question, respond. Now I'm giving them up front. And a lot of times I'll even provide a backgrounder. Everyone I had, I provided a backgrounder a couple days before the interview, no later than a day before the interview. So they could go check out my LinkedIn. They could look at my referrals that I had. I had people write testimonials about me, recommendations, I mean. They could take a look at my certification logs, my history and certifications, other professional development and things like that. But I would also give them information gleaning into my network. Because I've been focused on business development, sales, and marketing type of positions, I'm going to drop some connection names out there. Did I
Yeah.
talk to those connections? No, because chances are they might look at them to be referral calls to kind of qualify me going through that process. Well, then I will reach out to those contacts saying, hey, listen, I provided your name. They might call you to ask for a reference. But most cases, what I want to do is show them this is the industry you're in. These are connections that I actually have. And
Yeah.
and explain in some cases, I'll give a couple word, they're all bulleted. It's always, I try to keep it one page. I'll give them what I call a sample of my connection network. And I'll explain to them how I'm connected with this person. Because I don't want them to think, oh, anybody could go on LinkedIn and look for a particular company and pull names off of it. I wanted it. And the other thing too, I did say to them, if you're connected with any of these people, and if you just want to say, hey, listen, I interviewed with Jim Kunkle, feel free. You don't have to
Yeah.
tell them I gave them your name or anything like that, but feel free to do it. I have nothing to hide. And so I think that really kind of helped me a lot because I was real not overly aggressive, but I was very proactive because and I think it showed a little bit of passion and things like that. But in addition to that, because I have a network, because I have content I do and I show interest, passion, and that I'm a technical person, even though I might not be the subject matter expert completely, that I had a good understanding of the industry, the context in the industry, but also too what needs to be done in the industry when it comes to fit the purpose solutions or whatever the case may be. Hey, he's got a good understanding of coatings and corrosion. He's got a good network. He's given us a business development plan. And, one of them I gave a 30, 60, 90-day plan
Hmm.
so that they could understand what I would do literally my first quarter working at the company. And I think that helped out a lot to kind of change the narrative and get me up the ranks when it comes to even in the one job where I was clearly overqualified. And ultimately what ended up happening to that was it was I think what happened was I set myself up in a way of, hey, listen, he's got this extensive network, he's got this background, he's got this experience. The max we can pay is this amount of money. And we know he should be at a higher level, another job layer or two above this. And again, that's fine because if I can draw that out of them to know exactly where the pay range is, that's a good way of doing it as well up front. Now,
Yeah.
you did
Yeah.
say there are people that interview that companies will put out things to have interview, and they do. They build up a interview bank. That's what I call it, where
Yeah.
they will put out a job position. In some cases, they do it out there to have a catalog of candidates so that when they pull the trigger on somebody, they have a backlog of people they can go to. So in my recent experience, when I seen that happen, not to me, but to friends of mine, where they were talk about they were interviewing and it turned out to be going nowhere, is that the company was really looking to move on somebody that they currently existed, but they weren't there yet, didn't pull the trigger yet. And so they were looking to build kind of a backlog of interview people, candidates that they could turn to and say, okay, we interviewed these 10 people. Here are 5 that really shined. And then they go right to those 5 and say, hey, listen, we got an open opportunity. We interviewed you on this. Are you interested in it? So,
Well, I want to circle back to your business plan for a second because that's a very
yeah.
underrated thing to do. I mean, it's very forward thinking. And if you read on, job search LinkedIn, there's a lot of instances where companies are basically asking candidates to create business plans or create marketing plans or create this or create that. And then they take that plan and they use it without ever hiring the person. And so basically they're getting free work out of their whole interview process. There's a lot of, people are frustrated. There's a lot of distaste with that approach. Your approach is different. I mean, that's a very proactive going in and saying to them, look, not only am I the person for the job, but I've got a plan for how to get the job done. How long does it take you to sit down and do? Because without having all the details of the company and their operations, I imagine it's difficult to really do a full-fledged business plan. How long does it take you to prepare something like that before an interview?
So usually for me, and the reason why I say this is where the experience level comes in. Uh, I'm obviously over 50, but I've done this before. I've had experience before. I know what works and what doesn't work. The other thing is I always stay updated on trends and also how the industry changes. So as you gain that experience and that perspective, and you've done these things and you've had chances to improve it, feedback, marketing analysis, all this other stuff, product development, these things start to kind of build up for you. Now, my business plans are going to be relatively, if you think about it, they're not going to be, let's say, under 1,000 foot view, 1,000 feet, right?
Right.
They're going to be maybe that 5,000 feet. So what you're doing is you're providing kind of that basis, but then you're talking on the interview. And what tend to happen to me on the interviews is I would have to talk through the business plan. Now, yeah, maybe they were recording it or jotting things down, but when I what I've always noticed is when you're going through a business plan with somebody and the conversation starts to get in depth, it's showing to me that they probably either are lacking or they don't have sufficient enough mass to be able to execute on something of a plan like this. So it makes sense for them to hire a potential candidate like myself to bring me in to say, listen, he has this concept. He's done this. He's been there before, and he has a passion to do it. It makes more sense for us not to just take what he's given us and throw it on someone's desk and say, "Here, do this." We need to hire this guy, or we need to
Yeah.
hire this girl, and have them follow through on it. Now, if they are a very fair company, they're going to compensate accordingly. They're also going to add that upside when it comes to bonuses and things like that. Someone like myself, yourself, other people who are watching this, we're not just trying to get a job to get a paycheck and say, well, I can go in and I can just kind of slack off or not do anything. We, at being 50 and older, I think we have a lot more drive to prove ourselves to these new companies because our mindset's a lot different because of how we kind of made it through the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. I think we have that desire to work hard, be treated fair, and compensated accordingly. Does that make sense?
It does. I will say there's this kind of ties into my technology question, the question that I was going to ask. But if you talk about those eras of work, I mean, first of all, right, our parents were the mill workers, and they were the hard scrabble, blue collar types, that worked throughout the '60s and '70s and '80s, and we were brought up to know that you're going to go get a job, you're going to work. There is no free lunch here.
Yeah.
And we've been through the ebbs and flows of, economic boom and economic bust. We've been, our generation especially, has been, we've seen the advent of the World Wide Web before it was anything, right? I mean, it just
Yeah.
came out
Dot
of nowhere
com,
in the 90s. And then,
.com bust,
yeah,
Y2K. Yeah. All that kind of stuff.
we've the financial crisis of 2008,
8. Yep.
2009, and 9/11. I mean, we've been through all that, um, all the way up to the advent of AI. So we're a generation that has shown that we're adaptable and can change and we can learn new stuff because we've had to relearn stuff every few years as the technology has changed. So um, I know that. I mean, as long as I've known you, you're a gadget guy and you're a tech guy. And let's be honest, so am I. And we're a couple of 50-year-old guys who have fully embraced new technology. We're on a podcast, for God's sake. So we're doing a lot of tech forward things. What would you say to people who are not maybe as tech savvy? And frankly, I think honestly, with our demographic, our generation, there's probably a lot more people who are tech savvy than aren't. And I think we're mislabeled a lot of times just because we've got, thinning hair and gray beards and whatever, that maybe our skill sets are behind. I just don't think that's the case. But what would you say to people who might feel like they're a little behind?
So first, let me say that over 20 years ago, people said podcasts would not survive a decade. And look how important they are even today.
Yeah.
Even coming out of the political, when we saw, the Joe Rogans and things and different podcasts of how they influence this past presidential election. So, this form of communication is still very relevant and still very leverageable when it comes to either a career opportunity or a new career opportunity for you. But the technology, really the embracing of technology, I can remember, having a Radio Shack Tandy TL 1000 computer and printer that my wife and I paid over $3,500 for back, I
Hell
think,
yeah.
in late 80s,
Right.
89 or 90. But also, too, I remember, my grandmother talking about buying me a Commodore 64 and a TI and all these different things like that. But for me, for technology, um, and especially when you really look at where AI is right now, we are in that period of rapid advancement when it comes to technology. And this is going to be the challenge for the workers that are 50 and 50 plus, where they have to be able to understand exactly how to leverage, utilize things like Microsoft Copilot, OpenAI, like Chat GPT and things like that. But also, too, how can they use technology to further their career, maybe reinvent themselves, but also to stay relevant in the modern world today. And I think that really is not hard. It's understanding. If you want to learn about TikTok, there's tons of different informational videos on TikTok. Maybe you've got a nephew or a niece or somebody, one of your children. You can talk about TikTok. I mean, I've had people reach out to me that were friends talking about, hey, you need to be on TikTok, and this is why, and to really look at how successful they are on TikTok. But a lot of times you have to kind of choose exactly which technology you want to focus on, what
Yeah.
makes sense in your particular industry. Myself, and again, you can disagree with me on this, but I think LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and some other social media platforms for the coatings and corrosion industry work better than TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a lot of, I mean, there's your big four, right? I think you've got LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are kind of your
Twitter,
big four.
X, yep.
Um, X, yeah, sure. I still call it Twitter. I still call Heinz Field Heinz Field. So, I mean, that's, you're not gonna, I'm hard pressed to start calling it X. Um, but I think those are the big four. And by and large, one of those platforms is going to be great for most people to do their promo. And TikTok, has huge potential. And even some of my contemporaries who are similarly aged 50 plus uh, people get sucked right into TikTok. And so it does have its utility, but I don't know as a business platform, I'm not sure about it yet.
Yeah. But other thing too that I will also point out there too that if you're going for a position that says you need to be proficient in Word, Excel, and other, maybe say Microsoft PowerPoint, those type of platforms, you need to make sure that you are proficient in that. And there are a lot of free resources for training. Um, I remember a time working with someone who did not know how to do Microsoft Excel, simple spreadsheets. And it really kind of impacted them as they were going through their job, and they were relying on other people on their team to help them out to complete task or to help them build a spreadsheet, or how do I update this or how do I do that. And it really kind of comes down to you taking self ownership and saying, what's important for me in my job, or maybe what I'm looking to do to advance myself, and kind of bullet out, like you said, come up with those 4 or 5 things that are important. And you don't have to be, you have to be efficient and effective on it. You don't have to be expert. So whatever you need to do to kind of bring yourself up to speed, do that. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what age you are. Mike, I'll tell you a story. So this goes back into sometime in the 2000s. I was at a small gas station, and I went in and I pumped, and I went in to pay for it at the or get something, I think, out of the convenience store part of the gas station. Elderly woman, and she was actually posting on social media. I guess this would have been the late 2000s. Now I think about it, or no, I'm sorry, mid 2000s. And what ended up happening was, I said to her, "You're on social media," and she says, "Yeah, all the time. I love it." And that was a bias I realized I had, where I kind of had a
Yeah.
mindset of that if you're a certain age, and maybe back then it was like, over 50, over
MySpace or something,
60 or
right?
whatever,
Yeah.
you probably never touch a computer, a laptop, or barely. And I deal with my mother is she's a boomer. And I'm always the guy who has to be there with her to set up her laptop, buy the laptop, help her out, set up her emails, everything else like that. And so I think a lot of times too, is I kind of get in the mindset back then, not today, of that if you're a certain age, you're not going to be really technologically efficient and effective.
Right.
But that's head trash. That really is head trash.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been my family's IT guru for forever and a day. Now I will say proudly that my kids have surpassed me. I mean,
Yes.
my oldest is a electrical engineer by trade with a
Mhm.
master's degree. So, and we have some really big problems. We call it Mason. I've got a brother who's a software developer, and so we do have. My niece worked at Apple for a long time, so we've got some tech experts in the family. But it is something that kind of like you, I've been a go-to for a while, and I never shy away from tech. I'm a nerd. Let's face it. I'm always trying to figure out the how this stuff works and what can I do with it, and so I love it. So, but anyway, no, I think you're right. I think it's you have to be curious. You have to ask questions. You have to learn. There are resources out there if you want to educate yourself. I know LinkedIn Learning has a bunch, or just going to YouTube and finding videos to
Yeah.
watch.
It's
I mean, I use YouTube all the time to learn how to fix like the
the sink.
sunroof in my truck, or, how to put
Yeah.
a new starter in the mower or whatever. I love YouTube for that kind of stuff. Um, but I did want to ask you, credentialing. Um,
Oh, yes.
I know you have several certifications and credentials, and you've been very good about your continuing education, and making sure that you're current on not just technology things, but related to your profession, coding certifications and whatnot. What do you say to folks? I have done a lot of learning myself, and I've got a few certificates, but it's nothing to me. I've just never. I've done a lot of my curiosity drives me, right? Like I
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to podcast, so I learned how to podcast. Or I wanted to. Right now, I'm doing AI agent development. It's
Hmm.
a skill that I picked up in the past 6 months. It's just stuff that I go and I learn how to do. I don't have a piece of paper or I don't have any letters to put after my name that says I know how to do it. But I know that's important. So what kind of importance do you place on that? And what would you recommend to people who are kind of like me, who aren't, maybe gathering those letters when they should be? And do you think it's really necessary?
I do. I think because it really kind of focuses on your core competencies. So as much as you're really addressing, your communication skills and, that you're an active listener, you can speak in public and things like that. If you can showcase yourself as maybe a technical person or an analytical person or a strategic person, or you have some type of proficiencies when it comes to certain things, right? I think it's important to do that. You mentioned earlier, there are a lot of certificates you can take. Google offers that where you can do stuff on certain type of technical training that could be like, data security, and you get a little certificate. I think that really kind of helps showcase that you are an active learner. Also, too, if you are in a certain industry, I think it's important to really take those certifications. I'll give you a good example. In the protective coatings industry, I've taken level 1 for both concrete coatings inspection and protective coatings inspection. I also did the quality control supervisor, which is also a certificate as well, but those are really not certifications. And the reason why I want to bring those up is that I can never really qualify as an inspector, a certified coatings inspector. And the reason why is I don't have the field inspection work. I don't have that. But by having a level 1, it shows that I'm at least proficient or have an understanding of how the tools are done. What's the process and procedure of inspection plans? What goes into different types of standards and industry test methods and things like that. And that really kind of helps round me out. The only certification I've ever really been able to obtain and I maintain is the protective coating specialist. And the reason why I keep that is my role has been predominantly in specification development, writing specification, working with projects, project documentation, and things like that. But I've also taken other type of skills when it comes to, for example, Sandler selling system. I have over 5 years of study when it comes to the Sandler selling system. And then also some other things such as Kaizen, back when we had the emphasis on the Japanese quality control and continuous improvement. I took advantage of taking some classes for that. But a lot of it can be free classes, can be paid classes. And most people, being a professional, they're really kind of looked at or required in some cases, depending on what type of certification they have or accreditation they might have, to do developing professional development credits, those PDHs and things like that. So what I like to do is take advantage of stuff like that. The other thing too, I think is important too for not only your credentials, is being active in different industry organizations, associations, trade associations. It could be the AMPS. It could be whoever out there that you might want to be involved with when it comes to these membership and trade associations, but not being a member strictly, being a active member. And I mean that being on committees and being on different, writing technical papers or helping out to run some of these conferences and trade events and things like that. Because I think it shows a potential employer and your current employer that not only are you willing to really better yourself, but you're willing to help others in your particular industry. And maybe that also helps to influence some of your customers and prospects. But it shows that your volunteerism is there as well, which has a good business opportunity for your employer or future employer. And I bring that up as one of the talking points that I had for a couple of my interviews that I've had was that I was they brought out that, hey, we've seen that you were the chair for the industrial coatings track for the AMP Eastern Conference in October. And, could you talk a little bit about, when it came to running that as a chair? And I always talk about, I'm a team person, so I talk more about the team, but I also talked a lot about how we on the industrial coating side, in order to work with a lot of these authors and technical presenters, we kind of partnered with them because we want to have a real focused, well-rounded, a kind of a diversity of subject matter and try to keep it open. So what I like to also too is point out that a lot of times these different opportunities can lead into more networking, can create more connections. but it also can really help promote the company you're working for. Because a lot of times, an engineering firm might see, hey, Jim from so and so, he's involved and he's volunteering with this, and I think that does resonate with some of the contacts and connections you might be meeting or being introduced to or working with, depending on whatever it might be, a trade event or a technical being on a technical committee. I've known that since I left SSPC and AMP, I've been involved with Master Painters Institute and working on the Series 500. It's been a great networking opportunity for me, and it also looks great on the professional resume as well. That I'm also there representing not only my company that I work for, but I'm also there with all their competitors, making sure that everyone has an equal voice and say for working on performance-based standards and
Hmm.
different type of requirements for project work.
I have a neighbor. She's since moved away, but she is a long background in nonprofit work. And she was out of work for a while, and she used to go and volunteer. In fact, she's going to be on the show eventually here. She used to go and volunteer at the local animal shelter, because I bring that up because very much to your point of getting involved with association or membership organizations, or like I'm involved more or less in our local chamber of commerce. Getting out of the house, or especially when you're uh, looking for work, getting out of the house and going and getting face to face or volunteering with something is a way to network, and it's a way to get your name out there and meet people. I also belong to a an entrepreneurs group called Entrepreneurs Forever. It's a peer group, and for me, that's networking with other entrepreneurs and
Mm-hmm.
talking about you know how to run a small business. So those opportunities, rather than just sitting there and trying to crank out resume after resume on Indeed or LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter or whatever, going out and, like you said earlier, gripping and grinning and meeting people uh, advances your cause as well.
Yeah, and you talk about entrepreneur. Also, you have to think of the aspect of an entrepreneur. And what I mean by an entrepreneur, and you could be working for somebody. So, to give you a good example, if you work in, I'll just throw out there like a business development role, your responsibility is a product line, and your job is to grow not only the specification of that particular product line, but also to grow the distribution, the sales, also too that it's maybe it's a cutting edge technology, it's innovative, and all these other things. So what you have to do, I think, and when you have a position, especially like that, it's not like, hey, boss, tell me what I need to do to meet the checklist, the minimums of what I need to do, is to take that role and make it like it's your own business. And it's basically an
Sure.
entrepreneur within that business itself. And I think what that does is when you take ownership like that, it also makes that job a lot more engaging and more rewarding for yourself. I know that you are working to help the bottom line of your corporate, but also in that process, you're showing to them that, boy, that person or he or she could really takes initiative. And I think that helps you as you're looking at a lot of companies are going through succession planning. How many
Yeah.
people are working for companies out there right now? We seen a great change happen coming out of the endemic. We've seen a lot of people, companies struggling to find quality people. Mike, the other thing that's going on that, again, I don't know statistics or anything like that, but I hear these stories about candidates that are really great that can't get through a background check because they've got either a bankruptcy or they've got a record,
Hmm.
drug screening, crazy things that you would never think would be an eliminator for people for positions. And you're starting to see that sometimes these things are creeping up. And again, like I said, I don't know the statistics and how pervasive this is, but I do occasionally have read these stories about how sometimes even companies can be struggling to find a qualified candidate, but also once they find them, is trying to get them through the process of backgrounds and all these other things like that. Maybe I've know people that work for uh, uh, government contractor jobs that have difficulty because they had a misdemeanor. They can't get security clearance.
Mm.
And again, if that's the career you want to be involved in, and you have a misdemeanor and you can't get government clearance, you're not going to be working for that government contractor. So now you got to totally reinvent yourself and go a different career direction that you can not worry about having a misdemeanor on your record.
A lot of the people who are going to hear the podcast they're going to hear us talking about companies struggling to get qualified candidates, and they're going to be over here shouting, "Son of a
I,
bitch, I'm a
I am.
qualified candidate.
I
Call
know.
me, hire me." I've
I
submitted my
agree.
resume, and there's just such a disconnect of, frankly, we've got an ocean of qualified candidates sitting here who are in that Gen X 50 plus range who can't get a call back. They can't get an email. They're being ignored. And that's, the whole reason for this podcast is to bring a light to that problem.
Yeah,
I
but I was going to say, Mike, what I'd like to, we talked about this before we started this conversation, before you get to record. I had a friend of mine, he was in his mid 50s. He looked like he was in his 70s. He had, a little longer white hair, gray hair, really grayed out. He had the beard, not crazy grown beard, but he had the gray beard. If he grew everything out, his hair longer and his beard out longer, he'd be Santa Claus, right? So you can imagine, when he would tell me when people would see him for the first time, he said that he could see the life draining out the interviewees, the life drain out of their face because they looked at him as being, he's old as Dick Van Dyke. And so what ended up happened, I had said to him, why don't you do now? It's not every interview. This happened, he would say
By
it
the way,
happened.
that's two podcasts in a row that Dick Van Dyke's name came up, so maybe it'll be a trend here. But
Yeah,
I'm sorry, continue.
you got to check out his video Coldplay.
I
The
did.
man, the man
Yeah,
still has it.
that's what came up in the last conversation. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
continue about your friend.
But so what ended up, I said to him, dude, shave the beard, get a cut the hair down, do a crew cut, just get it all rid of it. And he didn't have to shave it all off. And he said that he noticed a substantial. This is what he says: substantial change when he would go into an interview, that he wasn't experiencing that life draining out of people's faces as much. He looked a lot younger without having the white here and the white here and all. Even though it was white stubble, it just didn't resonate with
Yeah.
people like it did with the white grayed beer. And I said, listen, if you want to be Gandalf or if you want to be Santa Claus, that's how you interview. But ultimately he did, and he's still in that position and everything like that. But the thing with it is, a lot of times it comes down to people do have because they can't ask you on the phone. Now,
Right.
if they look at your resume, and I think you pointed this out too, on your resume, stop listing going all the way back. Like I started working when I was 16. So that's 1982. Well, my first professional job out of college was in 1988. Well, I'm not listing all my jobs back to 1988. So I'm going to list the last 10, 15 years maybe. And if they want to go further back, but most interviewers don't really care too much more than, let's say, 10 to 15 years of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I will say this: ageism is built into the process. I believe that because any recruiter you talk to or any resume expert, all the folks who are out there advising us on how we should position ourselves for careers are saying the same thing. You can put your education on there, but don't list the year that you graduated. Don't list your jobs for about the past 15 or 20 years because it makes you look old. And so ageism and discrimination, and I hate to say it that way, but that's really what it is built into the process. If you get a resume that's 2 pages long, or you get a resume that says, I began my career in 1990 something, you're old, right? You mentioned it before about there are a lot of 20 and 30 something managers out there now, and they're looking to hire, and they're not looking to hire people that look like me and you. They're looking to hire their contemporaries, people who are their age or younger. They
Yeah.
certainly don't want to bring in an oldster who might know more than them and might threaten their job. And in the meantime, we're out here with all this experience, and in a lot of cases, we just want to, as I say, and it's one of my promos, we just want to effing work, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, the bills don't pay themselves. Sometimes you just need a job. Sometimes you don't need to be the CEO or the leader. Sometimes you just have a skill set that you want to put to work, and you want to, you take pride in your work and you want to get out there and do it. And so you just want that chance. So I think a lot of our listeners are looking for that chance. And, so I just want to try to highlight that a little bit.
Yeah. Now, coming on the sales and the business development side, you're always asked, no matter what, it's kind of that standard question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or where do you see your next move and things like that. And I tend to focus on, if I am interviewing with someone who's going to be my boss, to your point, you don't, you're going to be coming across, in some cases, maybe I come across that, oh my goodness, this person is way overqualified for this position. What I'm talking about is elevating my boss, who hopefully is that person that's interviewing me, and typically they are, elevating them so that I can get elevated into their position. So it's basically, the role that I want to have is basically collaborating with my boss, that positive things happen for him or her and myself. And so there are ways to address that, because that can be a difficult question. And I have, colleagues who got cut with me, who said that, that are in their 60s, early 60s, that said, I'm being asked by a HR specialist who's 20, anywhere from 25 to 30, saying, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And 5 years can put them literally at the point of, I'm signing up for Social Security.
Yeah, well, and that's really it. I talked about it in the last podcast. I plan to work forever. As long as I'm doing something I love and
It
it's
keeps you
lucrative.
alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to stop. And, when you look at Gen X employees, talking about how we were raised and how our careers evolved. We're a very loyal group. There was a study by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2023 that said the average tenure of workers 55 and over is 9.1 years versus 2.8 years for 25 to 34-year-olds. So, if you're asking somebody who's 50 where they see themselves in 5 years, where they see themselves is they see themselves being loyal to the company. As long as the loyalty is returned, they see themselves advancing in their careers because, like us, they're probably going to work forever, as long as they love what they're doing. And so that's why, you have to take that into account and say, don't discount those folks. Don't assume that they're here for your job, or don't assume that they're a threat. You
Yeah.
really got to dive down into dig deep into an interview to learn more about them.
The other thing too, I'd like to address, and I've done this before, when I've had opportunity to kind of team live stream with. Typically, it's going to be those people who are involved in coaching and things like that. There could be a lot of financial pressure on people 50 and above, and what I mean by that is, you always have the people who are the savers and those that are the paycheck by paycheck. And I'm not talking down on people that are paycheck to paycheck. It happens. It's easy. I've been there before. But you can always, it doesn't matter what age you're at, you could always start saving. And I think a lot of times too is, there's a lot of financial pressure when you start, if you are living kind of the paycheck to paycheck, you're living beyond your means most of your life. You've got a lot of expenses out there, a lot of things like, so you have to earn, I need to have that $200,000 a year job, either through salary and bonus coming in. If you're in that type of situation, that puts a ton of pressure on you, and it actually can be self-limiting for you, because now, instead of you looking at taking a position where you feel comfortable, it makes sense for you to do. Now you're chasing after. When I was younger, mindset was, I need to get a job that pays a lot more than this, pays a lot more than this, pays a lot more than this. But as you start to get to that 50 and above range, hopefully, if you are saving and you have some savings and things like it, gives you a little bit more wiggle room or comfort, that if you were to kind of take a different type of position that really didn't, maybe you're working for a family business versus a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah.
And so I always say to everybody that I encounter too is, make sure that you are kind of, putting money aside and things like that for the future, because really that's what it comes down to, is building that financial nest so that when things change for you, health, because you don't know, health can change. It could be you're over 50, you're struggling to find a super high paying job, or whatever the situation might be. That pressure won't go away if you go into your senior years with excessive debt or a lot of debt. That no matter what you do, you've got to have a high earning job to be able to move forward and survive.
Yeah. I will say, in this day and age as well, don't sleep on side gigs. I mean,
That's the other thing too. Yeah, that's a good point.
this is, I know you've got things that you do on the side, and I mean, my side gig is this. And if you look at my website, the other things I'm doing, my side gig is actually my full-time gig right now. So it's, uh, don't discount the experience that you've gained over the course of your career.
Yeah.
And in fact, I want to do a future episode with some of these solopreneurs that I'm familiar with, and some folks who have kind of unlocked the secret to turning individual expertise into, lucrative business. It's super interesting. And the folks like us who've got careers under our belt of expertise and lots of knowledge to share, and a lot of times you can easily turn that around into a successful business. And it could be like a small business, or it could be a one person LLC. So there's a lot of opportunity out there if you've got the desire to do that. I just think it's for the significant amount of negatives that I think a lot of our generation faces in the job search. There's also a lot of opportunity that we've got to keep our eyes open to.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to reinvention. If the whole thing is Einstein with insanity. Doing the same thing
Yeah,
over and hoping for a better result. It's never going to happen. So you might find yourself at a certain situation where you've got to totally reinvent yourself. And you and I, over our time, we've seen individuals that work for major corporations that went on their own. Their first couple of years were definitely a struggle for them, no doubt about that. But the perseverance, and also the passion, and also the drive for success got them to the point where they're very comfortable. They like what they're doing. They're still traveling, but it's not they're pulling their hair out because they've got all this pressure on them, like in their prior corporate lives. And that's kind of where I would like to be down the road, where I can decide what I want to do, how I want to do it. And, again, hopefully it comes down to having, enough saved, and also having a great network that I can rely on, that I can convert that from working for somebody to working for myself.
yeah,
For me right now, I'm not anywhere near that position. I have an LLC, but it's more for my tech. It's really for my technical content, and also too, because of what I do for limiting my liability and risk and things like that, is to throw it under the LLC versus keeping it literally under my professional brand as a
yeah.
person.
I know we've been at this for a while. I think the clock just ticked over to an hour. We could frankly
Yeah.
keep talking for more hours, you and I, Jim. I think there's a lot here, but I do think it's time to wrap up. But before I do that, I want to thank you for your being my official second guest, and taking the time to do it. I do also want to give you a chance to plug your LLC and plug the content that you're developing. I know you mentioned you've got a podcast and a newsletter. Where can people find this information about you, and how they and can they? Is there a link from there to your LinkedIn so people can follow you there?
Oh yeah, perfect. So before I say it, I just want to say to everybody, listen, I know everyone's situation's different. I know all things are not equal when it comes to being downsized, or you're looking for a new career opportunity, or you're looking to replace something that you lost. I do realize that, and I do appreciate that. The one thing I like to say to everybody is, don't give up. Reach out to people. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Mike. You can reach out to your colleagues and other type of professional network that you have. People want to help you. And so that's my message to everybody. But when it comes to me, predominantly you can follow me on LinkedIn. If you just search under the profile, if you just search under James Kunkle, Kunkle, you'll find my profile. And from there, you'll also find a couple group pages for me. The first one is for Coatings Talk, and that's where I post a lot of content relating to the coatings and corrosion industry. The other page that I have, group page, is the Digital Revolution. That's where you'll find a lot of the digital transformation, intelligent technology type of material that I'm putting out there as well. And then on there, you'll see the Pro Coat Tech LLC. That is the LLC that I've formed to roll all of my content under. And as I mentioned earlier, I had done that for more of the risk mitigation, liability, and stuff like that. But I do have an active podcast that's been doing extremely well. It is definitely not 100% in the industry I'm in, but it is kind of adjacent to it because digital transformation is happening across all industries. It doesn't matter if you're legal, if you're healthcare, if you're industrial, if you're in coatings or corrosion, it touches everything. And it's coming no matter what everybody wants to say or wants to say, whoa, slow things down. Progress cannot be stopped when it comes to AI, the intelligent technologies, and all these other things that we're seeing. People are going to get left behind if people don't start waking up. And so that's kind of the reason me doing the digital revolution. But if you go to any of your major podcast providers and you put in the digital revolution with Jim Kunkle, you put that in there, you'll find it. I highly recommend you check all the first season's 50 plus regular episodes, probably 2 or 3 dozens of extra content that's on there. A lot of content for the first season. It'll give you a good flavor of what I do on that podcast. But I hopefully, by listening to some of those episodes, I will gain your follow or subscription or whatever it might be on your favorite podcast platform. And it's an audio podcast, but also too, I do videos and things like that, which I do to the YouTube channel. For not only Coatings Talk, I do a YouTube channel, but also for Digital Revolution. But typically, if you go to LinkedIn, you can find all my content or links to it.
Yeah, and I would encourage people who hear this to reach out to you. I know Jim does screen his connections, but you're free to follow him on LinkedIn. But Jim's a wealth of information, and I like I said, he's the best networker I know. So if there's any stuff you're posting about networking out there, I think it could be valuable for people who are on the hunt here.
Yeah, read. I do a article series called Build Out, and a lot of it deals with professional development topics. So I think those articles are not technical articles. They're going to be more for process procedures, best practices, and things like that. But on the professional side, I think a lot of useful tips coming out of that, and I get a lot of good feedback on it too when it comes to the professional development side. So that might be another series to check out.
Yeah, good deal. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you joining me for a while. I know we've been talking for a long time. We may need to have you back on just to do some follow up,
Sure.
especially after you get into your new gig, just to revisit and see how that's going. But good stuff today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for watching and listening.
Thank you for listening to the I Want an Effing Job podcast. Look for more episodes on Spotify.